Okay, good evening, Cambridge. On behalf of the Ward 6 Democratic Committee, I'm very happy and privileged to welcome you all to the first of our two municipal election candidates forums that we're holding this year. The Ward 6 Committee has been either co-sponsoring or sponsoring these programs for over a decade now as a service to the city and the voters of Cambridge. We're not expressing any biases. We're not pushing any particular candidates. We're trying to give everybody an equal opportunity, and we try to do this as early in the campaign season as possible so that all of the candidates can hit the ground running in the last 2 months leading up to our November election. A lot of the forums coming up will feature candidates in smaller panels answering selected questions and so forth. But we've developed the process that we've been using by trial and error over the past decade, and it seems to have had some pretty good results, or at least good audience feedback. I want to thank the Cambridge Public Library for the use of this wonderful new space. We used to hold these at the Senior Center until we discovered how great this room was and how much cheaper than the Senior Center it is. Nobody tell the library staff that, please. We have a lot of candidates and we have a lot of questions, so I'm not going to take up any more time than that. We're going to get underway. The candidates have prepared opening statements and were given a couple of questions to prepare either written or rehearsed answers in advance. There's actually a logistical reason, as well as giving the candidates a chance to think a little bit for the first couple of rounds, to think in advance. There were cards offered to some of you as you were coming in. If anybody else would like to propound a question for the candidates, and these do need to be general, not neighborhood specific. If you need a card, Catherine, can you hear me? Oh, Nick, can you help? Sure, great. Nick McGovern-Tylo, our ward secretary. We will collect these after the opening statements round. And where is the timekeeper and the timekeeper's equipment? Catherine, do you have the... Okay. Yes. Dan? Okay. We have a card for you, and you can have the seat right over here. We did it. We did a random draw. All the candidates were asked to be here at 20 minutes of 6 to do that. The last two in, by default, got the spaces closest to the
1
podium.
minute, and you can divide this up between the two halves as you see useful, but we're going to be very strict on the time at this point. And the question is, what do you see as the most important issue facing the city of Cambridge during the 2 years of the coming council term, that is 2018 and 2019? And the second part of the question is, what do you see as the most important issue facing the city council during that 2-year period? And we will start with the Sumbul.
So we're probably going to hear, can you hear me? Okay, we're going to hear a lot about this tonight, so I will be as succinct as possible. So the biggest problem I see is affordable housing and preserving our racial and socioeconomic diversity of our city. Housing demand in recent years has skyrocketed and far exceeded growth in our housing stock. Rent prices have increased substantially, and new housing added to our available housing stock are often not available to purchase. Instead, it's a lot of luxury rental units. These factors have led to the displacement of important members of our Cambridge community, including families with children in our school system. As a Ringe graduate, I can't even count on two hands the number of alums who aren't able to return to Cambridge after graduating. It's a problem. Cambridge is going to become an unsustainable community if we do not elect city councilors willing to stand up for tenant rights and for the construction of more affordable and middle-income units.
Okay, thank you. Hari?
Okay, so from my perspective, the two biggest issues are definitely affordable housing and the opioid and substance abuse debts that we've been having, okay? I think we all agree that affordable housing is a big, serious issue here, and that's been what we've been talking about for at least 4 years now. In those 4 years, however, the price of owning a home has increased 10% year over year in the last, so 40% in the last 4 years. I think that in order to address this, we have to ask ourselves some kind of serious kind of questions, and we have to look at innovative ideas too, such as micro housing, shared housing, and linkage fees, areas like that. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, when it comes to substance abuse debts, that is just that's atrocious. Okay, we always talk about the opioid crisis, but there's an even worse crisis, and that's alcoholism. I personally think that substance abuse debts and income inequality are very much linked together, and I think we should strive together to put an end to all this. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Adrienne, Dennis.
Clarification. So
Yes.
we're only answering the first
No.
part of those?
No, both parts of it.
Both parts, okay. Thank you. Well, it's very easy and would be appropriate to say affordable housing helps small local businesses upgrade mass transit, improve pedestrian and bicyclist safety, school gap. You can just keep going on. But this all adds up to quality of life for everybody in the city. So how do you take all those issues and every decision you make and a solution that you come up with, how do you make sure that that advances the public good, that that helps everybody and all the issues discussed? How do we make sure that development is guided in a way that enhances the quality of life for the neighbors that are next door to new construction? It's easy to lose what we love. It's hard to keep it. That's what I do. That's my profession. As far as facing the city council, I think it's understanding the big picture, developing that vision for the city, and then refining everything. The budget and a few other things, but the stop sign is up.
Thank you, Dennis. Adrienne.
Adrian departed. I'm Olivia
Olivia.
D'Ambrosio, and to me, the answer is one and the same and revolves almost entirely around this pressing need to continue to hone the comprehensive city plan. This need will be addressed, at least in part, by the Envision Cambridge process, which, per their own verbiage, will result in recommendations on a broad range of topics, such as housing, mobility, economic opportunity, urban form, climate and the environment, and community interaction. And although consideration for the arts is noticeably lacking from that broad range of topics, it is that very word broad that otherwise, to me, seems right on the money, because although the issues of real estate development and affordable housing are pressing and urgent and must be addressed, I think we need to magnify them through a broader lens and contextualize them through a bigger picture that not only includes decisive action on those fronts, but is really geared, again, and couched in this organizing principle of how do we organize all of our resources to empower every constituent to be able to contribute and prosper in an inclusive environment. Thank you all.
Thank you, Olivia, and I have now corrected my lineup card. Brian?
So, the most important issue facing Cambridge, this is a very fascinating question because I don't think anyone up here really knows what the most important issue is. And I mean, I've talked to a few hundred people in the last month, so I've got an idea, but I definitely have not talked to all 110,000 people living in Cambridge. And we should probably ask ourselves why we don't know what's important. Why aren't we trying to find these opinions from people? So I intend to prioritize trying to get everybody's opinion and ideas on what's going on. I mean, it's definitely possible. I don't know why it hasn't been done, why we should guess on what's important to everybody. But for the city council, I think that one's a lot easier. Over the next 2 years, it's vital that we become leaders of political reform. The importance of this issue cannot be overstated. It is such a tremendous issue, and the change has to begin locally, and it has to start with campaign and election reform here in Cambridge.
Thank you, Brian. Nadia?
I think the biggest issue facing Cambridge is preserving economic diversity and ensuring that every constituent here is empowered to succeed and loving and feeling comfortable calling this place home. I think the most important issue facing City Council is making sure that this is a livable city for all residents, regardless of race, religion, and socioeconomic status. And I think that this does put a big focus on affordable housing, but also making sure that this city is livable. Like the stores around are places that residents can afford and can go to, and that we're supporting owner-operated businesses. So I think that the overarching goal of preserving economic diversity stems down to a focus on making sure that this is a livable and a safe community for all residents.
Okay, thank you. Jeff?
Thank you. Let me join the stand-up club. Let me first of all say that, I'm a neighborhood first candidate. We need to obviously create affordable housing. I have a whole aspect on my website, santosforcitycouncil.com, including a rent-to-own provision. We need to keep people in Cambridge. We just don't have millionaires and poor people. We need to grow the middle class. Secondly, we need to do a lot more when it comes to transportation. I work very closely with Governor Michael Dukakis and others. We need to build transportation lines. We need to use bicycles and transportation and cars all to move forward. Lastly, small businesses. I've met too many small business owners who are running out of this city because they're being forced out. And lastly, think about this, folks. Sanctuary city, we need to lead the state and lead the country. We need to protect churches, protect schools, and making sure that ICE does not come after our kids. Thank you. I have your vote. Hope for your vote in November.
Thank you, Jeff Santos. Gwen Vollmer?
We need to decide as a city how much we value economic diversity. And of course, wrapped up in economic diversity is racial diversity and ethnic diversity and educational diversity. There's a legitimate conversation to be had here about how much we can and should stand up to economic tides, but we have to proactively have this conversation or the decision will be made for us and in a way where we don't have the ability to change it. This is going to manifest itself in the City Council in how we handle affordable housing over the next 2 years and likely over many more years to come. We have to get away from contentious, limited policies and proactively seek out creative solutions that build consensus. There are cities as conservative as Dallas, Texas, that are experimenting with progressive programs like direct city leasing. We absolutely have to be innovative in our ideas. What's happening in Cambridge is happening all over the country, but it is happening more acutely here, and we have to be courageous in response.
Thank you, Gwen. Ilana Mallon?
Well, I have to say that that's tough to follow because it's everything I was going to say. And I agree with Nadia that protecting our economic diversity has to be key in the next 2 years and over the next decade. It's something that we're really losing our middle. And one of the things that we need to work on that is our affordable housing and our housing affordability here in Cambridge. This is not a Cambridge problem. This is a regional problem and it's a national problem. We should be looking to other communities who are putting in very progressive, innovative solutions and really seeing if they could work here for Cambridge. We need to be reaching out to our regional partners and seeing if they are doing what they need to be doing. We need to be looking to other communities that are actually local, that are really working on some innovative things to make sure that their communities are affordable and livable and people can continue to live in them and love them. I also think protecting our most vulnerable among us, the DACA recipients, the ones that everyone's talking about this week, but I'm talking about our elderly residents, our low-income residents, people who are vulnerable and are along the edges. We need people sitting at the City Council chamber who understand what they need.
Thank you, Ilana. Greg Murray?
Our diversity is our greatest strength. Every nationality has people that are so smart, and we need to protect them. And that's how we get stronger. This is Cambridge, Massachusetts. This is the brain state. And we need to protect everybody here. Immigration rights. We have to protect everybody. And so we have to set the example right here in Cambridge. This is where we set the example. So we can send out the message to the whole world. Because everybody in the whole world comes to Cambridge. So we're going to set the example. We're doing it right here. We see Donald Trump inviting Nancy Pelosi in and Schumer in, is working in a bipartisanship way to calm down this country. The country's got to calm down. It's got to get back to just going back to work and stop fighting about every little thing. There's too much fighting going on, too much killing going on, too much killing going on in the Middle East. Too many Christian women are getting killed and Christian kids are getting killed. And they're getting killed for nothing.
Time. Thank you. Vatsity?
Affordability is the main issue that Cambridge is facing. When we look at the numbers, we know that it's at least 43% of us can't afford to pay for a roof over our heads. And we can't pay for the necessary expenses. If you have a child that needs to be taken care of so that you can go to work, a lot of times if you're in middle income bracket, that's $2,500 per child, or close to $3,500, $4,000 per child per month. That's pretty ridiculous. That takes us up to about $5,000 or $6,000 a month just for two expenses, housing and one expense for your family. So, no matter how hard we work, it seems that we're just not being able to stay in Cambridge. I think that a lot of times when we look at the challenges of affordable housing, income inequality, and environmental justice, we're really needing to look at a city council that is collaborative, that is diverse, that's that does teamwork, and also hold each other accountable.
Thank you, Varsity. Mark?
Thank you. I agree with Councilor Carlone and many of the others that there are numerous issues, and I put them under the category of social and economic justice. That includes affordable housing. That includes a living wage. It includes high-quality, affordable early childhood education. It includes immigrant rights. These are all issues that we have to tackle and address with more vigor. But I'm going to concentrate on the second question real quick, because you don't hear a lot of disagreement up here, but if we don't have a council that can work together, we're going to waste 2 years. And the people who are going to suffer for that aren't the people in this room, right? It's our most vulnerable people. We're going to get 3 new councilors minimum, maybe more. Hopefully I get to return. And I have ongoing relationships with the majority of people at this table, incumbents and non-incumbents, that I've been able to work with on various issues. And so we need a council that's going to be able to be focused, that's going to stop with pettiness, and is going to be able to reach across the aisle and find common ground when sometimes there doesn't appear to be any.
Thank you, Mark.
I
Richard?
agree with Councilor McGovern that you need people who are going to be able to step in on day one, and I believe I have those qualifications. I think the issues that are most pressing to us, affordable housing, I agree with Symbol and her summation of what is going on. Look, Cambridge has become a place where it's too expensive to rent and too expensive to own. We're in big trouble on this front. I hope to work to change that reality. Economic inequality and diversity. Look, we live in the most innovative square mile in the world in Kendall Square, but most of our citizens are shut out from that greatness, and we need to do a better job at making sure we open up and have access to that for our young people. Early childhood education. It's the one issue that both the school committee, which I'm a leader on, and the city council, those who are sitting, and most of the city agrees on. It's time that we make this happen. Someone just talked about the unaffordability of early education and preschool for their children. This is something that we can solve if we have the right people in position. Elections matter. There are consequences. You know that from watching CNN every day, and I think that this election is going to prove that while there's open seats, you have to have people who can step in day one and lead and be aggressive.
Thank you, Richard. Dan?
What I see that we need to do here, listening to these articulate and accurate analyses, direct analyses of what we have to face and direct solutions. What we need is an agreed statement of what we want. We put aside how we're going to get there for the moment. There are many ways to get there, but there are many ways not to get there. Firstly, let's agree just what we want to do. All of us agree, not just each of us have a statement. Make it a city statement, collaboratively and determinatively, that we all sign toward to establish. Then we can determine the many ways that we can, this segues into the council working together, that we can make a way to move together forward, personally, deliberately, each of us, and with the support of our community.
Thank you, Dan. And Crystal?
The most important issue facing Cambridge is affordability, like everyone else said here tonight. Rising rents and land values are displacing local tenants and local small businesses. There's no guarantee of stability in the long term, and there are rungs missing on the ladders to home ownership. Families are leaving Cambridge because of the lack of affordable housing options, and like Vatsidi and Richard mentioned, Their child care is far too expensive. And because much of the housing we're building isn't designed for families, we have to do more to address the affordability crisis and in order to keep our city livable for a socioeconomically diverse community. Facing the city council, the biggest issue next term, Jan believes, is taking whatever recommendations come out of the Envision Cambridge Alewife planning process and developing zoning that can ensure the future growth in that area doesn't aggravate the existing traffic and environmental problems, and that creates a sense of place and neighborhood that people enjoy living and working and visiting in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Crystal. We're moving on now to questions from the audience. Oh, I'm sorry. Sean? I thought it went a little too fast. You need a microphone?
How kind of democracy is this? Get him, Sean.
Check. All right, here we are. So I agree with a lot of what everyone said here. The most pressing issue facing the city of Cambridge is, without a doubt, affordable housing and affordability. I encourage everybody to go to my website. This week I just released a comprehensive plan for the city of Cambridge on how to create middle-income workforce housing, low-income housing, and the most important issue facing Cambridge and housing is the preservation of affordable housing. There are many affordability restrictions that are going to expire over the next 3 years, and the city council is going to have to come together to work with these owners, find nonprofits, and preserve these affordable units for extremely low-income individuals across the city, and that's the most important issue facing us. The most important issue facing the city council, for me, in my campaign, a lot of people have joined and said, I've never been involved in Cambridge city government, and if I'm elected, and what I want to do for the city council is bring City Hall to the people of Cambridge, to a lot of communities that have been underrepresented for years and decades across the city, and give people a sense of civic engagement that they don't have to come to us, we'll come to them. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Sean, and apologies again. I knew when we did the draw that I shouldn't have let the tall guy block 3 other people. Sam.
Thank you. So as I started off with my remarks earlier, I believe that economic inequality and affordable housing are the 2 biggest issues in our city. And in terms of addressing these issues, we are going to need to create more opportunities and greater access to city services. We need to ensure that no resident gets left behind in all 13 of our neighborhoods. Much of what has already been said, I firmly agree with. We do have expiring land leases that need to be renegotiated. We do have issues around affordability. I want to also tackle issues around bridging the digital divide, making sure that all of our residents have access to the internet, creating a small business resource center to promote and foster growth and stability within our small business community. And then when it comes to issues facing the council, the bottom line is we all are progressive to some extent. We all trip over each other and believe the same things, but ultimately it's about collaboration and consensus building, and that's what I'm going to bring to the council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Now we move on to questions submitted by members of the audience. So, if elected, what would you see as your role on a city council that has at least 3 or perhaps more new faces? Whom do you think you will work best with? Dan.
I look to work best with each of us, each of you. We need each other to enjoy each other. I don't know if this is... Here we are. Yeah. My role, of course, to listen. To bring with me what I've learned from 10 seconds already. from our entire community, from everyone with whom I speak, and to listen to each of them to see how we can get each other to get things done. It's not play. I'm having a good time. There's nothing wrong with enjoying, but there's something wrong with not getting it done.
Thank you, Dan.
And on time.
Richard.
That doesn't say stop, Dan. It says something else. First, let me just look down and see who's here. So who do I think I can work best with? I think this question is going to be, I'm going to answer in a different place. I've worked with other folks, Mark McGovern particularly, but people I know, Alana, Sean, Sam, and Symbol. Those are the people that I think would work most with me as the new members of the city council. What I would say is it's easy for me. I've always in my entire political career represented and work for the most vulnerable citizens among us, whether it's the black and poor kids in the public schools, the kids in public housing, or the people who are marginalized, who are in our homeless population or in our pantries. I will work for the most vulnerable citizens in the city, as expected.
Thank you, Richard. Mark?
Aggressively.
And collaboratively.
And progressively. So we're going to get guaranteed 3 new members, if not more, right? And as I said earlier, if I am lucky enough to return to the council, I have worked with the majority of people up here. I know them personally, I know them professionally. I have filed major policy orders with every other member of the Cambridge City Council. You know, you often hear that the council is divided and this and that. That is not me. That has never been me. It's about finding common ground. We're going to disagree on some things, no matter what. We're passionate people. But can you leave that disagreement behind to find common ground, to work together, to move the needle forward for the most vulnerable in our community? That's what I've done my whole time on the council, and I'll continue to do that.
Varsity?
Hi, so I'm the type of person that really can work with anyone despite any challenges or different perspectives that we've had. But I've really recently had the opportunity to talk a little bit more about what Cambridge is with some folks. And I think that I would work well with Dennis, with Jan, with Sambul, with Olivia. I also think that my role would be listening and connecting community and bringing that robust community engagement process.
Thank you. Greg?
Working with all the city councils is very important to get things done. And I believe that we need an immigration attorney as a city council as well. There's going to be 3 new faces up there. We need immigration lawyers. We need people working together. We need the city manager and Mike Capuano, the congressman, and State Senator Sal D'Amico, everybody working together to get things done and make sure that we have housing and jobs for our citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alana?
I always say that my secret superhero skill is bringing people together around shared ideas. And I think that's the role I would really bring to the Cambridge City Council. I also think early on with 3 new members, at least 3, we could really fight for setting council goals very early on in the term, because without goals, you can't succeed. And as far as whom I think I would work best with, I think I'd be happy to work with any of the people up here. As Mark said, I have been lucky enough to work with many of the people up here and get to know a lot of you over this process, and I'm really excited about the opportunity to work with so many of you.
Gwen?
My experience in organizations teaches me that if you want to know what needs to change, you talk to the people at the bottom. You want to know what needs to change in your school, you talk to the secretaries. I am absolutely committed to working not only with all of the city councilors who are also on the council, but also with the city employees who are way better informed about what needs to happen and what will need to change in Cambridge. Those are the people who I want to build consensus with inside and outside the city council.
Thank you. Jeff?
I want to work with everyone. There's tremendous talent in this room, on this stage, and I think I can work together. I have demonstrated that working in local, on my radio show, which I will continue to do if I can become the next city councilor, one of 9. I think the platform that we need to have is to work together, but to make sure that we're always thinking about, as has been said on this table, those who need help the most.
Thank you. Nadia?
If elected, I think my role as a city councilor would be working to that goal of preserving economic diversity on city council. I think there are 3 really unique things that I would bring. One of that being bringing a seat to the table for young people, which we haven't had before, bringing a voice to the table as someone who can truly empathize with the experience of being housing unstable, but then also the fundamental relationship I have with the universities. I think that my goal would really be to push on universities to work with them and be more community-minded about their efforts, especially around real estate development. And I think that I definitely fall into the category of the more progressive city councilors.
Thank you, Nadia. Brian?
So over the course of my life, what I realized is working with groups of people, bringing people together, working with an engineering department, public department, commercial department, colleagues, is not a skill you're born with. I've got years of professional experience working cross-functioning with a number of different colleagues above me, below me, different states, sometimes different countries, and I've developed a really good skill set that I think would be great for this, the council.
Olivia?
The unique role I would occupy on the council is as an advocate for the arts as an economic and community building engine. And along those lines, at my nonprofit, where I'm the producing artistic director, I often manage groups of people, teams of people that range between 10 people and over 50 people. And when I look at this group, I can't possibly imagine that collaborating with them could be harder than collaborating with actors, directors, and playwrights. So when I look around, I feel that the work that I've done in my nonprofit would certainly prepare me to work collaboratively and positively with any of these fine and skilled folks.
Okay. Dennis? And Dennis, when you're finished, we need that mic passed down this end. I think you have another one down there, right?
You want me to use the other one?
No, you can use that one.
Okay.
But just pass it back.
My role with 3 New Faces would be the same as when I was part of the 4 New Faces 4 years ago. And that is my training in urban design and community architecture is to work with diverse groups to find the common denominator and to explain certain perspectives that are professionally ingrained in me. 80 to 85% of all decisions the council makes is almost unanimous, if not unanimous. It's that 20%, the more difficult parts. So I have a background in design, construction, and zoning. Zoning's boring, but nobody else does. And half of what the council does is related to new ordinances and zoning. I'm the head of, co-head of the zoning committee.
Okay, Harry?
Okay, if I were to be your councilman, I see myself on the community broadband committee. I have a background in electrical engineering, a master's degree in that, and I work in IT. I'm an account manager. I have family in IT. And right now, what I'd like to do is help advance this initiative by leveraging my experience with project management and negotiating. As far as who I'd get along or work best with, absolutely everybody here. They're all fabulous people, and I'm happy to be a part of this.
Okay. Sumbo?
So to the role, I'd bring humility. You know, we need more of that in our politicians. I'd prioritize relationship building. We have to work with each other. We can politely disagree. And as an attorney, I've been taught how to do that. So I would very much bring those qualifications to the table. I think we also, you know, need folks who come from the community. And I think we have to lift those voices up. And I'm excited to do that.
When you are a member of a deliberative body, such as the City Council, you can't afford not to work well with people. So to answer the second question first, I will work well with anyone should I get elected onto the City Council. When it comes to the other question, you know, I think there are some things that we should remember. City councilors, first and foremost, the City Councilor's responsibility is to hire and fire the city manager. It's also important to work with each other when it comes to issues around constituent services, issues around ordinances, and other key areas. And so I look forward to working collaboratively, being a community organizer in a decision-making capacity.
Thank you. And Sean?
So I believe I bring to the council, and my role would be as one of the only new face that has significant housing policy experience in drafting affordable housing policy issues and coming to the table, working on zoning. The past 2 years, I've been working on zoning reform to create a multifamily mandate in the suburbs to alleviate pressure off the inner core of Greater Boston. I can bring those skills to the City Council, but I can also bring the deep knowledge of the community, being here for over 3 decades and growing up in this community. I can bring a certain knowledge of what makes Cambridge truly Cambridge.
Thank you, Sean. Next question is about public transportation. As Cambridge's population grows, more and more people need to get around to work, play, and thrive in our city using our limited and crowded streets. What will you do to ensure safe and equitable transportation for all of our road users, particularly those who cannot afford or prefer not to own automobiles and instead get around by foot, bus, train, or bicycle?
I think the first thing we can do is go back to what I think was happening a couple of years ago where we had the extended hours on the T. I thought that while the ridership wasn't up, I don't think that we allowed that initiative to flourish in the time that we had. So we kind of tried it, we stopped it, we tried it again and said that it wasn't worth the bucks that we were paying. The truth is I think that it was going to be, over time, something that people relied on. It also jibes very well with my initiative to hopefully have 4 a.m. entertainment licenses in the square. So we're going to need modes of transportation that are safe and reliable and cheap. And then lastly, for the pedestrian and bike issue, I think we have to do more education of drivers. People do not understand exactly all of the nuances as a driver that bikers and pedestrians face when they're sharing the roadways.
Thank you. Mark?
Thank you. Quite plainly, our roads were simply not built for all the different modes of transportation that we're seeing or the volume of people on the roads. And so we need to create, and this is why I've supported, as Councilor Carlone has, creating a bike infrastructure, safe street infrastructure. One of the first things I did on the council when first elected was to ask the city to implement a Safe Routes to School program to help
Thank you, Mark. Nadia.
Vatsidi.
Hi, I'm Vatsidi. So equitable transit and access to equitable public transit is really key to getting to work, to getting to the grocery stores, and getting our kids to school. One of the two things that we can do, partnerships with institutions and partnerships with nonprofits and other local governments. Second, planning, pedestrian, motorists, bicycle, a whole comprehensive planning network needs to happen.
Greg?
Well, I would recommend all these tractor-trailer trucks come in at nighttime. And if they come in at Cambridge, let them come in at 10 miles an hour, because they are running people over. You can see the statistics. So that would be something you'd have to do right away. They can come in at nighttime, not during the daytime and everything. And bicycle safety, this is a bicycle safety city. Whatever we can do to do better for the bikes, we have to do it. Lights, more lanes, or whatever we need to do. You can count on me, Greg Mooring. Thank you.
Okay. Alana.
Hi, my name is Alana Mallon, and this is something that's really important to me, and I think we need to really work on a comprehensive network of bike lanes that makes sense, making sure that people are getting from route point A to point B in the city, but it needs to be a comprehensive, collaborative, and community effort. We can't just be putting bike lanes in everywhere. The other thing is I think we need to be working with our state legislatures and the MBTA to add more red line trains at rush hour. I think we want to make sure that our residents can live car-free. I think that's where we need to be moving towards, but the infrastructure needs to be there, and the city council needs to back that up.
Thank you. Gwen?
First and foremost, everyone has to feel safe on our roads. Nothing else can take first precedence. We have a social justice issue if the people who don't feel safe on our roads are the people who predominantly can't afford cars. On top of that, the MBTA busing system and the T system are not reliable or affordable, and while some of that is out of our control, we could be doing things like setting up a reimbursement program for those who need to use those services and can't afford them.
Thank you. Jeff?
This is a very big issue for me. I worked very closely over the years as a host having a show dedicated to transportation called Transportation Thursday. John Bussinger, who's my field director, is the main advocate for the North-South Station railing, bringing people back and forth. We don't have it. It's outrageous. Mike Dukakis is also an advisor to our campaign. He's been somebody who's been actually investing in the T. I say invest because that's where we need to go. It's a regional issue. I've talked with Mayor Walsh about this. I've talked with Mayor Curtatone, who I was at an event with last night. Bicycles, trains, and cars can't exist together, but we got to work collectively to make it happen.
Thank you. Nadia?
I think that there's tremendous room to grow in terms of accessibility, affordability, and safety here in the streets of Cambridge. And I think that I, as a potential city councilor, would want to take it a step further with some more daring approaches, and that includes, yes, reducing the speed limits, but also what about the possibility of pedestrian streets that are dedicated to bikers and are dedicated to pedestrians, and the opportunity to work with universities who already have these frequent shuttle services coming every 5 to 10 minutes. There have been other cities that have explored making sure that university shuttles are available to the public, and I think that's something we could push on the universities here as well.
Thank you. Brian.
The Green Line expansion is a very critical project that's coming up. It's going to be very important. And then, as people mentioned, the Red Line definitely could use some work. I think I'm the only person here running who can say that. I've got 10 years of professional experience working in the transportation industry, specifically with rail locomotives. If you want somebody who can engage and work effectively with the MBTA, is what I do. I'm an engineer by degree, by trade, and I would ask for your #1 vote for that.
Thank you. Olivia, and can you be the turnaround person on the mic? And Sean, if you send the other one back down toward Dennis, we can do that effectively.
Sure. So I'm supposed to talk into
Yeah,
this? Yes, okay.
Go ahead.
Great, thank you. I agree with many of these fine ideas. Just to throw another one into the mix, because I now live and work in Cambridge, I recently divested myself of my car, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. I am a different person and a different citizen in this city because I do not have my car anymore, and I mean that in a positive way. So whatever we can do to incentivize people and educate them on the sort of benefits of divesting themselves of their car if they are able to, I think we should publicize that and push it as an option that would both reduce the amount of cars, therefore freeing up more spaces, and also putting more people on bikes, on their feet, and on the T.
Thank you, Olivia. Mike switches. No, Olivia, if you just send that one down this way.
I have a background in transportation as well. I was also the chair of the Transportation Committee where we first started pressuring MIT to move forward on the Grand Junction. As part of the Ordinance Committee, we are now telling them to get their Volpe zoning, they have to come to an agreement on the, I keep seeing the thing going up and I'm losing my mind here, on the junction. We are a wealthy city. We can help the MBTA through funding, just like we're doing at the Leechmere Station. We have $200 million in the bank. If that's important, we can do it.
I have a 2-point plan. One of them involves better switching for the Red Line, and that could double the frequency of the trains. Another thing I'm passionate about is shared parking. So they do this in Alexandria, Virginia, as well as Indianapolis. Folks, Indianapolis is not exactly a very innovative town. If they can do it, we can too, and this would cut our number of parking spaces by 53%. It would create less emissions. You don't have to drive around looking for parking. And finally, holistically, it would cut your overall cost of renting an apartment by about 5%.
Thank you. Sumbul.
So I won't repeat what's been said, but I have a few ideas. I think I approach this question from an equity lens. I think if we create a light and helmet giveaway program at community centers throughout the city, because the high cost of bicycle accessories could scare away lower income cyclists from investing in lights and proper helmet gear. So that's something practical that we could easily do that Boston has done. Additionally, we could require that commercial and residential developers seeking to cut their parking requirements pay towards a trust designated and enhanced infrastructure for cyclists, pedestrians, and ride-sharing programs.
Thank you. Sam.
So when it comes to the communities of the greater Boston area, one thing I want everyone to remember is the Red Line corridor and the Green Line corridor. So how is it that the communities that these lines run through, how is it that these communities can work together? Because these challenges when it comes to transportation are regional. We're not going to be able to solve it by ourselves. But the other thing that I just want to note is it's not just about these massive ideas. I'm also concerned about making sure that our sidewalks are ADA compliant, that the tree roots are not disrupting the sidewalks so that our residents can walk down. I mean, that's what city council is. It's trees, it's streets, it's sewage. And I want to make sure that our residents, because as I walk around the city, I've noticed some issues with that. And so I want to make sure that our residents are being properly accommodated.
Thank you. Sean?
I'd like to couch all of this in the fact that I bike and I drive. And as far as investments go, I was deputy counsel for the Joint Committee on Revenue, where we drafted the Fair Share Amendment, which will tax millionaires at a higher rate and invest that money in infrastructure and schools to help us with our public transit. I believe also with dedicated bike lanes or bus lanes with transponders that can keep the light green so all those folks can move through quickly. And I also wanted to say, I do disagree a little bit with the question. I think in this community in Cambridge, there are a lot of folks who are low income who depend on cars, and we should be mindful of that as we think about how we want to plan for our future and also plan for those folks as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dan?
Again, lovely and informative to listen to each of you. We can learn from each other and work together. Some great ideas. I think we can combine with other towns and lobby the MBTA to improve in many ways. I have another idea to put forward. How about an Uber Lyft that's nonprofit, that's municipally undertaken? It wouldn't be a city run, but it would be city initiated. And that would diminish traffic substantially. There'd be Cambridge drivers, Cambridge cars.
About a page-and-a-half spread with a number of artists' renderings, probably so many that's why the school committee announcement didn't get into it, about the proposed, or actually about to happen, newest large apartment complex in the redevelopment area known as the Quadrangle. That's one of the spaces on the other side of the Alewife T station. What is your opinion, and what are your suggestions for the future of this kind of development in Cambridge? And we start with Councilor McGovern, who needs a microphone.
We're talking about the apt building in the so-called Quadrangle.
Is that Wheeler Ave?
It's Wheeler Street.
Wheeler.
Every year, the Dukakis Policy Center and the Boston Foundation and another commission, I'm blanking on the name now, publish the Metro Boston Housing Report Card. And one of the things that they say every year is that cities, if they want to see rents come down, they need to get to a 5.5% vacancy rate. Cambridge is at about 3%. We need to build more housing, and we need to build more housing of all types, because the people with money who get into bidding wars with lower income people are always going to win. And if we don't supply enough housing to meet the demand, we're going to continue to see people get priced out of this city. So on Wheeler Street, that's going to be 100 affordable units in that building through inclusionary zoning. That's going to change the lives of a lot of people. But we also have to make sure, because that area is so prone to flooding, we have to make sure we're putting requirements on the developer for flood mitigation.
Vatsity?
Yeah, bouncing off of what Mark just said, the key to getting affordability and affordable housing in any type of city is planning. And we're talking about community engagement. We're talking about looking at what do we really need, moderate, middle income family housing, and we also need the preservation of affordable housing. If we know that that's what we need, then that's what we need to ask for. So how do we get there? That's the question that City Council has to decide in the next 2 years.
Thank you. Greg?
How do we determine affordable housing? At what level people earn? Is it 40,000, 30,000, 50,000? Who does that? Who does the statistics on that? So, but we need to have affordable housing. We all agree on it up and down the aisle here. But we need to do it. For an example, we got the Volpe site coming up. We know MIT can do it. We just got to get them to do it. And so, I support affordable housing. You can vote for Greg Moore. Thank you.
Alana?
I think every single person up here on this panel tonight said that affordable housing was the #1 priority of the next city council, and we can't be for affordable housing and anti-development where it's possible and capable of putting it there. I'm in favor of this, but I do agree that, there are zoning requirements that we need to be looking into around the flooding. But I am very for this Wheeler Street development, and I'm excited to see it come to fruition.
Gwen?
I am incredibly excited about all of the new housing that is coming through the inclusionary zoning ordinance that was passed just recently. I am also concerned, however, about the thousands of people in our city who will not qualify for that housing because they are below the 50% area median income minimum income. Those people who are living here with vouchers through either Section 8 or Cambridge Housing Authority vouchers, we have to create programs like the direct city leasing program that's happening in Dallas, where those people can get into market rate housing that already exists.
Thank you. Jeff?
This is an issue that is paramount, obviously, but let me just say that not only do we have to look at the 20% affordable housing, we have to look at, and again, plan at santoscitycouncil.com, plug. But the fact is, though, is that we need a rent to own. We need to keep people in the city. We can't just have them there for 2 or 3 years and then all of a sudden they leave. So that's a big part of this, to have a diverse community. And it's extremely important that we make that happen.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm very excited to see that we are adding, more than 100 new affordable units. I think that with all developments and moving forward, if we are really going to all agree to prioritize affordable housing, I think we could be doing more than we are on inclusionary zoning. The feasibility study that 20% was based off of also showed that we could add 5% middle income housing, and I think that's worth exploring, how we can open it up to a broader range of income levels. And I also think that with housing, there's an opportunity to, in tangent, push on universities to meet more of the demand for graduate student housing, which would open up about 10,000 units that are currently short-term rentals to be long-term solutions for Cambridge families.
Thank you, Nadia. Brian? And Brian, would you send that mic down when you're finished? And Sean, if you head the other one over toward Olivia.
So it's easy to see why housing costs so much. Right? I love this community, and I can see that this is going to be an issue every year for the foreseeable future, probably through our lifetimes, because people are going to want to keep moving here. There's a lot of great ideas: taxing out-of-town owners, adding middle income requirements to the inclusionary zoning, taxing, adding a transfer tax, building more properties. Definitely, we need to add more properties, but. The truth is we probably need to do all of these continuously, just going forward, if we have any hope of making Cambridge more affordable.
This way on the mic, Brian. Thank you. Nadia? Olivia?
I recently moved from renting a studio in the Vivo building on 3rd Street to owning a 344 square foot studio on Arlington Street in Porter Square in one of our beautiful old buildings. And what I can tell you, after having lived in Vivo, is that building more units does not necessarily mean attracting more residents. What I can tell you from purchasing my 344 square foot studio is that it is extremely hard for young middle income people to live here and lay down roots. So whatever units we create, we have to A, ensure that they actually attract more residents, and B, create pathways to home ownership, especially for young folks like myself who would like to grow old here.
Thank you, Olivia. Dennis?
You're all invited over to Olivia's house to see if we can fit into her apartment. Hopefully that doesn't count.
We restart the clock for Dennis.
Thank you. It's just a little humor. You can't just build housing. You have to build neighborhoods in a wasteland. And the city, and we've talked about this on council, the city has to move forward in putting in new streets, not just building a bike bridge, but building a shuttle bridge. So in bad weather, people won't have to go over a terrible situation. 130 units per acre is what is proposed in the project that you just heard described. I've been at every neighborhood meeting and planning board meeting on this with the neighbors and trying to make the building fit in as much as possible.
Thank you, Dennis. Ari.
So my wife and I, we live in Alewife. In the last 3 years, they had 4 brand new huge apartments up there. They're all luxury condos. And the people that are building it are speculators. They're big developers with outrageous net profit margins, like Equity Residential and Avalon. Their net profit margins are 30 and 50%. That's more profitable than Microsoft and also more than any drug company. Asking them to help us solve the issue with affordable housing is like asking the drug companies to help us solve the opioid crisis. We need to develop housing ourselves, and we can do it. And we also got to be a little bit innovative and take an iterative approach. We got to explore micro-housing, non-standard living arrangements, and also something like a Dutch auction process.
Thank you, Hari. Sumbul.
So I won't repeat what's been said, but I am in favor of the development. We need more housing. Again, we have to be strategic. How much of that housing will affect the neighborhood? To Dennis's point, I also think we have to look at creative options. Not only working on a regional level, can we figure out incentives to smaller developers of land and offer them a income tax credit to keep the rent below market, so that we have folks who may be coming from public housing want to rent something, buy something, and don't fit the bracket. So we have to really think about a plan towards that.
Thank you, Sumbul. Sam?
I'm supportive of mixed-use, mixed-income buildings. I'm supportive of transit-oriented housing, higher density around areas of mass transit like Central, Porter, Alewife, Kendall, and the whole northern Mass Ave stretch. So when it comes to the Wheeler project, for instance, and other projects like it that ought to be transit-oriented, I think those are things that we should be considering. And then also when it comes to other issues, when our housing crisis requires a menu of solutions. No singular solution is going to address it. And so I think we need to be pulling on all levers. We need to make sure, one of the things that Boston is doing that I would be interested in bringing into Cambridge is an Office of Housing Stability, looking at different ways that we can work, as Sumbul said, with landlords, especially smaller ones, to incentivize lower costs for rent or other. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yep.
Sean.
So, I'd say, Cambridge has to make a decision. Do we want to be a leader on affordable housing and housing production, or do we want to just keep things the same, or do we want to develop our communities into what they've always been, a place of opportunity? I lead on my housing plan with the quadrangle and what we should do there, and I propose using a 40R zoning tool, which brings state money to the city of Cambridge to invest in multi-use, multi-income communities. And on top of that, it makes you eligible for a Mass Works infrastructure fund to help alleviate some of those issues. And the best part about it is that requires 25% affordability.
Thank you, Sean. Dan?
Okay, again, all great ideas. I propose that the first thing that we do about housing and every issue is that we determine, clearly, and as our policy, what we want Cambridge to be. Not all the proposals are excellent, and we probably need all of them, and some quite creative. But first, let's determine what we want Cambridge to be. If otherwise, we'll lose it. It will just drift away from us. And we can do that, and from that and to that, we can direct our efforts.
Thank you, Dan. And Richard?
100 units is good. I think that we can do better. Someone talked about the net profit margin. These are developers who are making a ton of money on the backs of the citizens in Cambridge. And I think it's about the kind of housing. If you want to keep families here, you have to build housing for them, family-friendly housing. You can talk about micro units if you want. It's cute, but families can't live in those. I think the other piece is that we have to be responsible. We need to do a better job at making sure that these developers who are making a gazillion dollars at a time are building housing that works for the city. I agree with Dennis that a master plan is necessary. If we continue to build housing like we ought to, we may, with 3,000 people on the waiting list, we may get to them. If we build 600 affordable units a year, we'll get to them in about 15 years. But we're also going to have to plan around the schools that we may have to build if all of these sections of the cities become populated with more students. We have to think about master planning in a real way.
Thank you, Richard. The next question is primarily directed toward first-time candidates. So since we have a first-time candidate up next to start, is a good time to ask it. And for the two incumbent counselors here, just put yourself in either the mind frame of the question or roll your memory back to 4 years ago when you were a first-time candidate and answer from that perspective. How many city council meetings have you attended in the current year or session? Have you ever spoken out on a subject? The writer says, I want to know how you would have voted on key issues during that session. And if you're not a regular city council, how can your candidacy be taken seriously? So we start with Vatsani. And we need to think about it while we get a mic to her.
I also need 2 minutes. Gosh, so as a new candidate, the challenging thing for me was that I couldn't go to all of the city council hearings because I had to stay home with my son. But I actually watch almost every single city council hearing on TV. And I think that that's great, right? But I also think that the challenge was that I couldn't be right there with them. And, I want to change that. I think that for me, we need to bring city council hearings and other hearings to the community. So let's work on that together. Let's get more people involved.
Thank you. Greg.
All the key issues that faces Cambridge, you have to be speaking about them, and you have to, discuss it, every single detail that there is at the city council level. And it's very important that all the councils work together. City manager, the secretaries, the congressmen, State Senator Sal D'Amico, everybody working together. That's the way it works. You got to talk about it, especially the key issues of housing and jobs. You got to talk. Thank you.
Alana.
When I was the education liaison in the mayor's office for 2 years, every Monday night I watched the city council meeting, no matter how long it went on, and I became quite addicted. So I don't go to the meetings because, like Bot City, I have 2 young kids who require dinner and things like that. So I do watch them every week, and then I watch Robert Winter's show and catch up on all the actual background and everything. So I do often go and speak out, especially when it has to do with our kids, about education and about food and inequity in this city.
Gwen?
I have spent a lot of time watching city council meetings, hours upon hours watching city council meetings. Remotely, usually, although sometimes I do actually go down to City Hall and watch them. I have spent a lot of my life as an angry couch person saying, somebody should fix that. And so this is my effort to fix that and to fix Cambridge. This is my active enrollment.
Jeff?
I have attended several meetings. I have watched hundreds of meetings. Way to go, CCTV. I have, as a journalist, covered hearings in Cambridge and around the country. There are a lot of great people who serve on the council now. We need to build on that. And that's why I'm running.
Okay, Nadia.
Before March 29th, when I launched my campaign, I went to a lot of the Monday night meetings. And then since I've launched my campaign, I have a new practice of tuning in one earbud as I'm going canvassing. So I'm canvassing about 4 or 5 hours a day, and I tune into all the Monday night meetings while I'm going. And then I've also made an active effort to attend as many of the planning board meetings, especially around Volpe, since that's one of the developments I deeply care about since it is on MIT, and I think that there should be a push on graduate student housing embedded into that plan.
Brian.
To answer the question, yes. I've been going to the city council meetings. The most recent one, I went there and I spoke out in favor of the measure to add a question on this year's ballot if we should pursue publicly funded elections. That was tabled, but I went there to speak out in favor of it because I believe it's unbelievably important that we push towards that goal, that end.
Thank you. Yeah, Mike back, and Olivia, you need one. Oh, give that one to Olivia for this time, and then send it back.
In recent memory, I've attended 6 in person, and like my colleagues, I have scoured the World Wide Web, and particularly our city government website, to fill in any missing blanks. I also attended the Pride Brunch. I have spoken once in person on the Foundry And I have had my comments read into the record, also about the Foundry at another time when I was unable to attend because I was out of town. I must have made quite a spirited comment because I was then asked to lend my expertise as an actor, director, and producer just this week to a 2-hour roundtable that was specifically guided around how the black box performance space in that building is going to be used. And I was particularly keen on adding my opinion on how having an arts organization inside, or an arts space inside of a building like the Foundry is rife with possibility for synergies between the arts industry and the other industries that are in that building, and also making that space into a neighborhood destination.
Dennis?
As a consultant to the city for 30 years, over that period, I had numerous presentations to the council and was a specialist explaining proposals related to zoning. I did one of the early schemes for the public library expansion, was involved there. And I was an ordinance committee junkie because of the substance, especially as it related to development in the city. And I felt that I had a great understanding of how the city worked by doing all that.
Harry.
So I showed up to a lot of rallies and never went to a city council meeting or watched too many videos prior to last month. I've always been locally involved. I've always read a lot on Wicked Local, on Reddit. I post a lot of questions regarding the local laws and everything, and also the Boston Globe. That's what I do.
Symbol?
So I've been to several this last year, and I watch them online pretty regularly. I first spoke out to a city council meeting 16 years ago when I was with the Cambridge Youth Council that I co-founded, and we were advocating lowering the voting age to 17. There were many attempts to do that, so since then I've spoken out on immigration rights, the 287G in particular, and have attended planning board meetings and zoning board meetings.
Sam?
I want to applaud Sumbul for co-founding the Cambridge Youth Council because I was a member of it after she was. And yeah, I mean, I've been civically engaged for half my life, so since I was 13, I've been attending various meetings of the city council, the school committee, their subcommittees, and so on, and then also the different city commissions and boards. I've had the honor of serving on a few of them as well. So, and then my most recent city council appearance was back in June when I spoke on protected bike lanes.
Sean?
So first I have to shout out Quentin Zondervan. He has a great quote that he puts out there from Winston Churchill. The problem with democracy is it takes up too many of your weeknights, which I always appreciated. I've been to dozens of city council meetings. After I announced, I sort of stopped going because I didn't want to be that guy in the back room watching over your shoulders. I've been to Affordable Housing Trust meetings, and my guilty pleasure is to watch the planning board meetings. 8 p.m. is tough to get out, but you can always check in the next day. And the one time I spoke was at a CDD meeting they had on the inclusionary zoning, where I had asked, why can't we be like Boston and have different zones with greater affordability in certain zones that could maybe take more affordability? To which the answer was that we are so dense here in Cambridge that it wouldn't function the same way that a more sprawling city, or metropolitan city like Boston would. And that's my experience.
Thank you, Sean. Dan?
Can you hear me?
Thank you. Okay. I've been to several council meetings, school committee meetings, and zoning board meetings. A couple of those zoning board meetings were on my own behalf, I admit. And I think that it's so wonderful that you folks are here sharing them with the whole city and the whole world if they're interested. It's a civic benefit. And I think that it's necessary that we stay informed, and certainly we have to be informed.
Richard?
Yeah, so, over my years in politics, I've been, frequent the chamber. I, like Sean, agree that, and I understand, and my colleagues who are on the council understand that, as an elected official, sometimes you want to allow them to do their work and respect the office that they hold. So I've withheld a lot of times from going to council and speaking out about particular issues. But I would say, when I'm there, I'm usually speaking about issues that are dire to my community in the port, mostly around gun violence and youth violence. And so I speak up when I ought to, but I also respect the fact that these folks were elected by the people, and I try to give them their territorial space as they do, and I respect them, do that with us on the school committee. They don't intrude. So, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And we finish up with Councilor McGovern on this one.
Thank you. In terms of my attendance at city council meetings, I don't believe I have ever missed a meeting in my 4 years. There was one meeting that I was home sick with the flu, and I was watching it on TV, and I couldn't take it anymore, so I grabbed a bottle of water and some Advil, and I went in and finished out the rest of the meeting. And in fact, at subcommittee meetings, very often Councilor Carlone, myself, Councilor Devereaux, and Councilor Mazin are often the only four at subcommittee meetings, so my attendance in those are also extremely good. But I don't think people have to attend city council meetings to know what's going on in the city, and in fact, maybe that's not the best place to be, to know what's going on in the city. And I think a question is, in terms of if this question is getting at effectiveness, I think a question is, what else have you done in the city besides running?
Comfortable as this space, there would be a lot more citizen attendance at council meetings and air conditioning. So I'm going to put out as a challenge to Councilor McGovern and Councilor Carlone, and pass this to your colleagues, and certainly as a challenge to whoever emerges as our 3 or more new councilors in January. How about taking some of the very large sum of money that we have in the rainy day fund, renovate and bring the Sullivan Chamber up to at least the 20th century, and temporarily talk to the library about meeting here, which would also have the benefit of forcing council meetings to end at 8:45, as we're going to have to do. So that's a segue into a series of short answer questions. We're going to give the timekeeper a break, because these are going to be 10 or 15 seconds each at the most. And Catherine, if somebody can offer you, if you can offer yourself a shoulder massage, and be back for the next round. So the next question is a two-parter. A short answer and a very, very one-word answer. The short answer part is, if you are elected or re-elected to the council for the next 2 years, will you continue, or would you be holding any substantially half-time or greater employment other than your council position? And if so, please describe what it is. And the second part, which is a one-word yes or no, and possibly at most a 3 to 5 word explanation, in the ensuing 2 years from January 2018 to January 2020, would you anticipate being a candidate for any other elected office, municipal or otherwise? And if we start with Mr. Murray.
I would say to you that no, I would just be a city councilor watching things throughout the whole city. There's enough to do there. And we want to make sure that we get jobs and housing.
No explanations, just the
2 or 3 seconds?
The yes or no.
No, I'm not going to look for another job, and I'm not going to run for another position. Thank you.
Thank you. Ilana?
I love my job at Food for Free as program director, which gives me a large opportunity to be out and having authentic conversations with community members every single day. So yes, I will keep my job, but in a limited capacity. And no, I will not be running for another office.
Gwen?
I will not be running for another office. I am the sole provider for my family, and I think there are a lot of people in Cambridge who can understand that if your family's needs come first and foremost before anything else, and so that will be my priority. But I absolutely will be exploring with my job ways to share so that I can be as devoted as physically and mentally possible to my responsibilities as a city councilor.
Jeff?
Thank you. Yes, I will be continue to do my radio show and on television through CCTV and so forth, and Free Speech TV. The fact is, though, I can advocate for the people of Cambridge just as well and even bigger than what was currently right here, right now.
Nadia?
No, I will not be seeking another.
You're not running for president? Oh, that's after the council term.
My priority is to be a city councilor full-time. I want to put in the full-time work because I think that's what it deserves. I am currently a student at Harvard, and I would be open to taking a leave of absence if it would get in the way of doing it full-time. But right now I'm studying political theory and government infrastructure, and that's been really complementary to really trying to improve on the way I approach, working with city council. And so for me, it would depend on how that would get in the way of doing this job full time. I'm used to working on top of school. I had to work 6 jobs last year to help support my family, so it's something I'm used to, and I will not be seeking any sort of other office in the near future.
Okay. Brian?
So no, I will not have a full-time job or a part-time job if elected. I will just be full-time city council. I will continue my volunteer work. I do caring canines, me and my little puppy head, visit retirement homes and stuff, so we'll continue to do that. And then I'll continue with the activist groups. I'm with CRE and Represent.us and stuff. But as far as work goes, no, and I will not be running for anything else.
Olivia?
I will not be running for any other office. I will reduce my teaching appointment at MIT to only 1 section per semester, which will be a 4-hour per week commitment. And I am already working with my associate producer at Bridge Repertory to take the reins if needed, so that he will become Batman and I will become Robin. That said, I have worked more than full-time hours every single year of my life that I have been in the workforce. So even though I will keep those other positions, I will give full-time hours to my work as a city councilor.
Thank you. Dennis?
Including my work with neighborhoods and committee meetings that Councilor McGovern mentioned. That's a full-time job right there. I do work 4 hours a week average on projects that I had already completed or designed prior to becoming a councilor outside of Cambridge, mainly Winchester and Plymouth at the moment. And I will help advising those communities in the future, because that's what you do.
And Dennis, running for president or United States Senator, anything else?
I've been asked to run. No, I haven't been asked to run. No, this is the greatest office to be a part of, because you can do much more at this level in the shortest period of time than at any other level.
If I were elected to be your councilman, I would give up my day job as an account manager in the high-tech sector, and I'd focus full-time on this. And also, I would not seek for any other office.
Symbol?
I've wanted to be a city councilor since my days at Range, so I would be devoted full-time. There are times where I could be offering some pro bono services, and if I'm called upon to do that, I'll do that. And no higher office for me.
Sam?
I have already pledged to make this my full-time job, and I will. So as your next city councilor, being your councilor will be my full-time job. And also no plans to run for other offices in the next years.
Sean?
I will not be seeking higher office. For me, this is about the city of Cambridge. As far as working full-time at another position, there's a number of complexities I'll have to think about with the State Ethics Commission, because I do work in public service. I've been working in public service my entire career, and I'll have to work through those issues to see if it's even a viable option. I also have significant student debt from going to law school, and the public service loan forgiveness program requires me to work full-time or 2 part-time jobs. And so I'll have to make a decision about how I want to handle that going forward, but first things first.
Dan?
City council will be my highest office, friends. Working time and a half in this way. Firstly, I'm lucky, very, very fortunate that I'm provided for through my lifetime of work. But time and a half, because I have wonderful friends in the city who will work with me, and family in the city who will see my election as an incitement to to do more, to do right. So I can bring more than myself to get things done, which is wonderful. I look forward to it.
Thank you, Dan. And Richard?
You know, unfortunately, I don't have the luxury not to work. You know, I have a daughter who's a junior at UMass and plans to go to medical school, and I'm going to do all that I can to support her, and working is one of those things I can do. So I don't plan to abandon my family just because I have a seat in the city council. I've been active for 20 years for free, and the truth is I plan on working to support my daughter and her academic ambitions. Only if, and I do mean only, if the Ward 6 committee endorses me, will I run for president against Donald J. Trump. If that doesn't happen, I do not foresee at this moment me running for any higher office.
The ward secretary will so take note. And I should have reminded everybody before some of the, especially incumbents, started speaking, mayor is another elected office. So.
I would say this. If I were elected mayor, I would have to resign.
Yeah. Mark?
You know, yeah, it's not quite accurate, but this is not a 9-to-5 job. If you're doing this job well, it's 24/7. I can't go to the supermarket on a Saturday without stopping to talk for at least a half an hour with constituents who ask me questions and ask me for help. So this idea that, well, you know, if you have another job, you must not be as dedicated as someone who doesn't have another job, I think is really misleading and not something that should be a campaign bullet point. Because I think everybody works really hard. Now, I work 8 hours a week as a social worker with children suffering with mental health issues. I'm not going to give that up. I'm good at it. I help kids. That doesn't mean that I don't put 40 hours in for city council. I put a lot more than that in. And I think this question is, you know, it's again, it's a divisive question. And I'd love to have the financial security to only work one job, but I don't. And I am not running for any other office.
Thank you. And
so this will be my full-time job. I do volunteer every week on either providing legal access to immigrants and fundraising for that accessibility. So I'm not going to let that go, and especially not at this time. I also write policy and organize Asian Americans across Massachusetts. So I ideally would like to keep that volunteer work and the volunteer work that I do with the Women's Center. I'm not planning to run for another office.
thank you. Yeah, you went on.
Didn't I just answer that?
You did. Okay, so hang on to the microphone. So the next question is literally a one word, and I want to do this one quickly so we can get at least one more longer question in before we have to vacate the room. This is a question submitted by a 2015 council candidate and current state representative for the 26th Middlesex district, which is a good part of Cambridge, east of Maple Avenue. Mike Connolly. And Mike asked us to ask you all, would you vote in favor of the petition by MIT students to require 1,800 units of graduate student housing as a condition for commercial development at the Volpe site? Alana?
I was supportive of the petition, but I had reservations, and I communicated those.
Gwen?
Yes, I would.
Jeff?
Yes, I would. We need to build on that.
Absolutely.
Brian?
Yes.
Microphone switch?
Yes, my students need somewhere to live.
Okay. Dennis?
The process of the 1,800 has to be worked out. We have told MIT to get their zoning. This will have to happen. So it's in the books.
It looks like I may be the only contrarian here, but as it stands, I'm very much against the Volpe redevelopment initiative, okay? MIT has 4,000 graduate students that need housing. This would only address the needs of maybe 200, I know they're gonna build 1,400, but none of them are formally allocated to graduate student housing. If MIT wanted to solve this, they would have done a long time ago. Another thing, they believe that it's more profitable to create high-end retail than it is to provide housing for a graduate student. That's my view.
Well said. Yes, I would, and more.
Sam?
Yeah, so at the moment, undecided just because there's a new graduate student working group, and I look forward to their report on October 13th before I make comment on this.
Sean?
I agree with Sam, but I also lean more towards no. I don't think we should be using the Volpe site as a bargaining chip for more graduate student housing and sacrificing housing for families and individuals who are low income. I think we should also work with MIT to figure out which parcels they already own and where they can already redevelop land and not use, and set this precedent where we use our developments as bargaining chips. I don't think it's a good strategy.
Thank you. Dan? Yes or no?
Sorry, it's nuanced. There's more to it. Yes, certainly, we need housing for the graduate students, more housing. But it needs to be part of a larger question that we need to actually investigate and make a determination so that all the graduate students can have housing, and so can families. It's not easy, and we shouldn't let it go without addressing it.
Richard?
You know, I would agree with Sean that, you know, we have to sort of look at this. I plan to independently look at each project and see what its value and worth is. I would say this, that I think that the universities need to have the burden of building more housing. I'm not exactly sure that the Volpe site and having a quid pro quo is the way to go if we're planning on development in the city.
This is a complicated issue. This type of litmus test question, yes or no, on an issue so complicated as how we get more graduate student housing, is the type of, it creates divisiveness in the dialogue. And so the people who answered yes to that question are the good ones. The people who answered no to that are going to be labeled as the bad ones. I met with the petitioners yesterday. This is complicated. The ordinance actually does not say that graduate student housing has to be built on the Volpe site, right? So that in and of itself. So I'm going to vote to move this forward to the ordinance committee so that it can be fully vetted and looked at, and we can actually have the dialogue we need to have. But let's not box people into a corner about whether they're for or against, you know, this ordinance without having a full discussion about it. That is not helpful to us.
Is that the whole question? Varsity? Yes, it is.
Thanks, Mark, for the clarification, because I had that same concern that I don't think the question was really what the ordinance was saying. I believe that we do need more student housing, so yes, but I also believe we need diversity options for housing. So we're going to have to think about how we get there.
And Greg?
We can probably do both if they just go up a couple more stories. If you can go up a little bit more, you can do both. Affordable housing and students all together. We all need affordable housing, and we have to sign an agreement to that. And we also have to sign an agreement for the youth apprenticeship programs. Every journeyman should get an apprentice, period. MIT can do that. It's very simple, very simple.
Did you answer this one? Yeah, I thought you did. Okay, we're going to go back to the timekeeper. I'm going to trim this down to 25 seconds. Try to be as brief as you can. This will probably be the last question, but I want to make sure everyone has a chance to answer it. Over 70% of Cambridge voted last year to tax and regulate marijuana. What steps will you take to ensure that our community is included in the economic boom resulting from this? And how will you implement the new cannabis law in Cambridge? And we start with Gwen Vollmer.
I've been watching closely the states that have legalized medical use of marijuana ahead of us, and I have some grave concerns about the budding sort of large corporations who are moving in on small marijuana growers, and I very much want to protect local small businesses here in Cambridge, and I think that has to be our priority before we let corporations come in and take their place.
We need to study this more. We need to educate. We need to make sure it's public safety is a focus here. We don't want people, you know, driving if they're not, you know, of the sound mind. There's a lot of issues here. We need to really study it.
I would just echo what Jeff just said. I think that there's a lot more that we need to look into in terms of the effects of these decisions. But yeah, public safety and local owner-operated businesses, which should be priority.
Brian?
So 70% of the people voted yes for this. I would say, as an elected official representing these people, we have an obligation to make sure that this happens successfully in a timely manner.
Well, the arts have long been enjoyed and sort of gone in concert with recreation and safe recreation. If there's a way to sort of integrate the public safety issues that are at hand with this issue and also allow it to be something that can be integrated into the overall fabric that the arts can sort of have its hand in. Maybe that's the way. I mean, but you kind of got me. I haven't thought about this one entirely through, so I'll give it some more thought.
Dennis?
The council certainly has discussed this. Approving medicinal marijuana was one thing. However, there are studies that show that it's ideal not to have medicinal and recreational together. People who need medicinal tend to be older, and recreational generally tend to be younger, according to the studies, and the older folks don't like that kind of an environment.
Time.
So I'm all for it. I would just say split it up. They shouldn't be the same installation.
Harry?
Okay, so I'm actually meeting up with a cannabis activist tomorrow morning who's in this audience. I just thought I'd like to bring that up. I'm very much for all this legalization, decriminalization. One thing I like to see is standardized labeling of the dosages on whenever you buy a cannabis product. Like when you buy cigarettes, it tells you how much tar and nicotine is in it. I think we should have the same thing for cannabis, and also we should educate the public a little bit better on this.
Yeah, I think we do need some public education towards, targeting the negative, negative sentiments that are being thrown out, and have a sincere planning process around who we're giving licenses to and where.
Sam?
Yeah, I would like to echo the sentiments on making sure that the business owners and the shops that we're bringing in here are locally owned, women-owned, owned by people of color, and et cetera. And then the other thing is also just going back to one of the ideas that I've been advocating for on the campaign trail. This sounds like a wonderful project for the Small Business Resource Center that I would like to create.
Thank you. Sean?
I agree with Sam and Sumbul. One of the important things we need to remember is there's a lot of big money behind the marijuana industry. A lot of folks coming in here, itching their hands and licking their chops, getting ready to make a killing. And we should really pay attention to how we can keep things local, particularly in communities of color. There's some elected officials in Mattapan and Dorchester who worked on an amendment to the bill that would look at whether or not we can require that, and that's something that we should also explore in Cambridge.
Yeah. Dan?
Good. Again, we're having an informative and informed, intelligent discussion. And I agree that we need to address the dosage. We need to publicly educate, and we need to keep it local. That's good. We have this is new here, and we can do it right. We can do it. We can keep control, which we have been giving away and taken from us in housing, and we can take a lesson from that and be sure that in this state we have no excuse not to keep it ours, and we ourselves control it.
Thank you. Richard?
Yes, I was the second signature on the legislation that ended up being passed at the statewide, the ballot initiative. Absolutely. If we can declare a war on drugs that we had and persecuted people of color, Latinos, blacks, and poor people for the last 30, 40 years, we absolutely have to make sure that the reparation is that they are part of the economy that's going to burgeon in the city of Cambridge, to make sure that not only people are hired, but people are trained in all of the facets of it, from growing to buying to transporting to securing, so that they can have their fair share of this booming economy.
Mark?
I supported medical marijuana when it was a ballot question, and I supported recreational marijuana when it was a ballot question. On the medical marijuana side, the city had zoning in place for years, but no medical marijuana dispensary could open in the city because the zoning wasn't right. I rewrote the zoning. We passed the zoning thanks to Councilor Carlone and his help. We are now getting medical marijuana dispensaries in Cambridge. We would have to do the same thing with recreational marijuana. We really need to see where the state comes down first as to what requirements they put in, and then we will work with that to develop for what's right for Cambridge.
And Varsity?
So in order to keep our local economy booming when there are other interests that want to be part of this booming economy, we do need to figure out a strategy that our community can be part of this initiative, whether it's medicinal or whether it is recreational dispensary. So I have worked on this with other cities, and what everyone has said here has been the challenge in every single city, but I think Cambridge can figure it out.
Greg?
I understand that marijuana is legal, but I don't support marijuana, and I don't support the kids driving around smoking marijuana. And I'm sure as a law point of view, they're going to be arresting them. So we have to look at that as well, you know. People are getting run over in Cambridge. And if they're stoned driving around, they're going to get arrested. So I have to look at it like that. I've already voted against it at the EMK Institute, because they asked me what I thought about it. So I already voted
Thank you,
no
Greg.
for it.
I'm going to go ahead and close this out and say that I agree with Vice Mayor McGovern. We really need to see where the state comes down on this and then lead.
Okay. We might be able to squeeze in 10-second time, okay? Sorry, Mark. I want to thank all of our counselors. Big round of applause. And thank you to CCTV and to members of the press who covered this. We look forward to seeing the fruits of your labors and hopefully see you all next Wednesday. Thank you.